What happens when a company tries to push out their most valuable employee after 25 years? Well, let me tell you about Abigail and how she turned the tables in the most brilliant way possible. This story will give you chills. Picture this. You've spent a quarter of your life building a company from the ground up. You were employee number one. You watched it grow from a tiny startup in a cramped warehouse to a $288 million global powerhouse. And then one day, you get an email that changes everything. Abigail had been the silent engine of core logic dynamics for 25 years. She wasn't just an employee, she was the company. When they had two clients and a printer that jammed if you looked at it wrong, she kept everything running. She built systems from scratch, negotiated contracts, and worked through the night to keep servers online when no one else could. The founder, Ronald, used to call her his silent engine. He'd say, "When everything's falling apart, you're the one keeping us running." But recently, things had changed. Ronald became distant. Their Monday meetings turned into quick video calls, then Slack messages, then nothing. Then the young, loud interns showed up with their fancy laptops and buzzwords. Disrupt, synergy, agility, words that made Abigail's head spin. They acted like they'd reinvented business itself, and she was just some relic from the past. So when that dinner invitation arrived at 8:55 a.m. with the subject line, "Dinner with the Carters, Friday 6 p.m.," she knew something was up. She just didn't realize how cold the wind was about to get. The restaurant was one of those trendy rooftop places with overpriced, button sized food and servers who whispered like they were in a library. Abigail put on her navy blouse and pearl earrings, her armor disguised as grace. Ronald was there with his wife and daughter, Frances. Now, Frances looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury commercial. Perfect blonde hair, designer suit, and a LinkedIn profile that screamed future CEO. The conversation started innocently enough, but then Frances made a comment that cut deep. "It's so funny to think of you working in a garage somewhere." She giggled, talking about the company's early days. Funny? It hadn't been funny when Abigail was working 16-hour days to keep the company alive. Ronald tried to smooth things over, mentioning how Abigail had saved the company twice and brought in their first $1 million contract. But Frances just smirked and said, "Well, every company needs its building blocks." Building blocks. As if Abigail's decades of dedication were just foundation stones to be stepped on. Then came the real blow. Ronald cleared his throat and delivered the news with corporate precision. "We're bringing in new energy, a new vision." Frances just completed her executive program and has fresh ideas about blockchain and AI. Abigail kept her expression calm, that knowing smile she wore when someone tried to explain her own systems back to her. "What's the transition plan?" she asked. 7 weeks. Frances would shadow her for 7 weeks, then take over. They had a generous severance package ready, of course. That's when Frances leaned forward with a grin that could cut glass and said the words that would seal her fate. "Time to step aside, Granny." The table went dead silent. Even Ronald's wife froze mid-bite. But Abigail, she just smiled and said, "I completely understand." Here's what Frances and Ronald didn't know and what makes this story absolutely incredible. Back in 1999, when the company was broke and barely surviving, Ronald had walked into Abigail's office with a piece of paper. He couldn't pay her what she deserved, but if the company survived, he wanted her to have her share. At the time, it seemed like a nice gesture, a thank you card. But years later, when lawyers reviewed every document, Abigail realized she owned 8% of the company. Real equity, real ownership, real power. She never brought it up, never flaunted it. She thought she was still part of the company's soul. But the company had changed, and so had Ronald. He stopped asking her opinion, stopped caring about her insights, and started chasing trends and flashy presentations. The following Monday, Abigail went to work like nothing happened. She smiled at the receptionist, poured her black coffee, and checked her emails. But behind the scenes, she was planning something extraordinary. She logged into the shareholder portal. That 8% stake was still there, solid as bedrock. And thanks to the company's growth, that small gesture had become incredibly valuable. She scheduled a meeting with Ronald. 25 minutes, just the two of them. When they sat down, she dropped the bombshell. You didn't mention the shares I still own, she said calmly. Ronald's smile vanished like someone had flicked off a light switch. He assumed she'd cashed them out by now, but she hadn't, and she still had voting rights. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Not yet. I'll support the transition respectfully, but if Frances is planning restructuring or selling assets, I want a seat at the table. Ronald frowned like she'd broken some unspoken rule. You're holding on out of nostalgia? No, Abigail replied. I'm holding on to what I built. But wait, it gets better. Abigail went home and dug through old files, finding something she'd forgotten about: a non disclosure agreement from 1999, acknowledging that key tools she developed were based on her previous consulting work. She owned the intellectual property. She met with an IP lawyer who confirmed it. Abigail owned significant parts of the company's core systems. With her stock and her IP rights, she had more leverage than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Frances was making mistakes left and right. She was copying strategies from Abigail's old documents, claiming them as her own innovations. She was pushing changes that violated customer contracts and threatened the company's infrastructure. When Frances held her first strategy meeting without inviting Abigail, the agenda revealed her plan: aggressive outsourcing, back-end cuts, and removing what they called legacy management, code for getting rid of Abigail. But here's where Abigail's brilliance really showed. She wasn't just sitting back and taking it. She was building alliances, protecting her work, and positioning herself strategically. She sent cease and desist letters demanding Frances stop using her proprietary code. She informed the board of her intention to vote against the restructuring unless there was an independent review. And she had lunch with the CEO of Nexra Systems, a company that had been eyeing CoreLogic for months. As Frances's initiatives started failing one by one, vendor migrations collapsed, rebranding plans were blocked for trademark issues, and her analytics model crashed spectacularly, the pressure mounted. Clients were calling, concerned about service disruptions. The board was getting nervous. Frances's confidence was cracking like ice in spring. The climax came during an emergency board meeting. The room was packed, tension thick as fog. The chairwoman announced that any management changes affecting major shareholders required full board approval. When Abigail stood to speak, she didn't need slides or props. She spoke with the quiet authority of someone who'd earned their place through decades of results. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said. I've given this company 25 years. I built it with faith in what we were doing. But somehow that devotion became invisible. I'm not asking for a title. I'm asking for respect. Then Nexra's CEO spoke up, revealing that clients were worried, contracts were on hold, and the leadership changes were destabilizing everything. Their acquisition offer was still on the table, but only with stable leadership. In that moment, everyone realized Frances had to go. The board made their decision. Frances stepped down immediately. Ronald would stay as an advisor, and Abigail? She was asked to lead the transition advisory group, reporting directly to the board and Nexra's senior partners. Her new consulting contract paid 4 times her previous salary with complete control over systems integration during the acquisition. Frances disappeared without a word, gone like someone who never understood what they were touching. 3 months later, CoreLogic was officially part of Nexra. Most staff stayed, and Abigail handpicked the new leadership team. The people she'd mentored were now running half the company. She never went back to her old office. Instead, she set up a home workspace by a window overlooking a lake where she could watch the sunrise while her systems, the ones she'd built decades ago, still ran reliably in the background. The real kicker? She received an email from the board chairwoman that simply said, "What you did, how you did it, we've never seen anything like it. You didn't just protect your legacy. You reminded everyone what real leadership looks like." This story isn't just about corporate revenge. It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone take it away. Abigail didn't win through aggression or manipulation. She won through preparation, patience, and the quiet power that comes from actually building something valuable. The lesson here is profound. Never underestimate the person who's been there from the beginning. They might just surprise you with how much power they actually hold. If this story gave you the justice chills you needed today, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of workplace revenge and corporate comebacks. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself at work? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one.